I'm Elena, and this is the story of how my husband thought he could leave me with nothing. It started with hushed phone calls at midnight, mysterious withdrawals from our savings, and a name, Vivian Carlisle, that I'd never heard before. Nathan wasn't just planning to divorce me, he was orchestrating a complete financial takedown. But he underestimated me. He thought I would collapse into tears. Instead, I took action. I protected what we'd built together, and exactly 9 days later, his entire scheme imploded in his face. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special. I can't wait to share. But what hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal. It was how meticulously he had planned it all. How many lies he had told me over dinner, while holding my hand, while making plans for our future. And the ruthless lengths he was willing to go to destroy 15 years of marriage. I'll never forget that rainy Tuesday night in Seattle. The persistent patter of raindrops against our bedroom window would normally have lulled me to sleep, but something had been keeping me awake for weeks. An unsettling feeling I couldn't shake. Nathan had been different. Subtle changes that anyone else might have missed, but after 15 years of marriage, I noticed everything. The late nights at the office that suddenly became more frequent. The way his phone would always be face down. How he'd step outside to take calls, claiming it was just work stuff. Each incident on its own seemed innocent enough, but together they formed a pattern that made my stomach twist into knots. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. This wasn't unusual lately. Nathan had been claiming insomnia, saying work stress kept him up. But as I reached for my water glass, I heard his voice from downstairs. Low, cautious, measured. She has no idea. Just a few more weeks and everything will be settled. I froze, my fingers still wrapped around the glass. Who was he talking to at 2 a.m.? And what exactly didn't I know? My heart pounded against my ribs as I slipped out of bed, careful to avoid the creaky floorboard near our door. The hallway was dark, but a faint glow from Nathan's study cast long shadows across the wall. I moved silently, thankful for the thick carpet that muffled my footsteps. "The accounts are almost ready to transfer," I heard him say. "Once the paperwork is filed, she'll be completely blindsided." I pressed my back against the wall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Accounts? Paperwork? My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. "Vivian, trust me," he continued, his voice dropping even lower. "I've thought of everything. Elena won't have time to react." Vivian. The name hit me like a physical blow. Who was she? A mistress? A lawyer? Both? I wanted to burst into the room and demand answers, but something held me back. Instinct, maybe. Or self-preservation. I carefully retraced my steps back to our bedroom, slid under the covers and forced my breathing to steady. When Nathan finally came to bed 30 minutes later, I pretended to be asleep, fighting the urge to confront him. Not yet. Not until I knew what I was facing. The next morning over breakfast, I watched him carefully. Nathan sipped his coffee, scrolled through his phone, and complained about an upcoming meeting. The perfect picture of normalcy. There wasn't a single hint of the man I'd heard whispering secrets in the middle of the night. "I might be home late again," he said casually, not looking up from his phone. "The Madison project is in its final stages." I nodded, buttering my toast, with steady hands. "No problem. I've got that charity gala anyway." He glanced up briefly, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Right. The Children's Hospital thing." "The Cancer Research Foundation," I corrected. "Of course," he said, but I could tell he wasn't really listening. After he left, I sat at our kitchen island for a long time, my coffee going cold beside me. 15 years together, a beautiful home in Queen Anne Hill, shared friends, family, holidays, plans for the future. Was he really willing to throw it all away? And more importantly, what was he planning to take with him? I opened my laptop and logged into our joint accounts, something I rarely did since Nathan, being a financial advisor, had always handled our finances. What I saw made my blood run cold. Regular withdrawals over the past 3 months, $3,000, $5,000, $7,500. Small enough not to immediately raise alarm bells if I happened to glance at our statements, but large enough to add up to over $60,000, missing from our savings. I clicked through to our investment portfolio. Several stocks had been liquidated recently. Our vacation property in Bainbridge Island had a new loan against it. When had that happened? And there was a transfer of $125,000 to an account I didn't recognize just 2 weeks ago. My hands were shaking by the time I finished my review. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to force back tears. This wasn't just about an affair. Nathan was systematically dismantling our financial life, piece by piece. That evening, instead of the charity gala I'd mentioned, I met with Rebecca Winters, an old college friend who had become one of Seattle's most respected divorce attorneys. I hadn't told her much over the phone, just that I needed urgent legal advice. We met at a small cafe in Ballard, far from anyone who might recognize us. Rebecca listened without interrupting as I laid out everything: the late-night call, the name Vivian, the disappearing money. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "First, I'm so sorry this is happening to you," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Second, we need to move quickly. From what you've described, Nathan is preparing for a divorce where he controls all the assets and leaves you with as little as possible. Can he do that?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "He can try," Rebecca said, a determined look crossing her face. "But we're not going to let him succeed." As rain streamed down the cafe windows, Rebecca outlined what we needed to do, the immediate steps, the documentation, the timing. By the time we finished our meeting, the weight in my chest had transformed into something else, a steely resolve that surprised even me. Nathan thought he had everything figured out. He thought I was oblivious, trusting, easy to discard. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. The next morning, I moved through our house like a ghost, touching photo frames and keepsakes that suddenly felt like artifacts from a life that was quickly unraveling. 15 years of marriage captured in smiling vacation photos from Maui, Tuscany, the Adirondacks, all places Nathan had claimed were our special spots. Had he been planning this even then, smiling for the camera while calculating his exit? Strategy? I pulled myself together before Nathan returned from his morning run. By the time he walked through the door, I was sitting at the kitchen counter, sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone as if it were any ordinary morning. "Good run?" I asked, not looking up. "Great," he said, slightly out of breath. "Did 8 miles today." The casual lie slipped from his lips so effortlessly. His running app was still connected to our shared tablet. He'd done barely 3 miles before stopping at Westlake Center for 45 minutes. Meeting someone, perhaps? Vivian Carlisle? "Impressive," I said, matching his casual tone. "I made a fresh pot of coffee." "Thanks, babe." The term of endearment landed like a slap. He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. "What's on your agenda today?" I forced a smile. "Lunch with Melissa, then some shopping. You?" "Meetings all day. The Peterson account is getting complicated." Another lie, so smooth you'd never know. Nathan had transferred the Peterson account to his colleague Tyler months ago, something he'd mentioned over dinner and clearly forgotten telling me. "Sounds stressful," I said, watching him over the rim of my coffee cup. "Will you be home for dinner?" He hesitated just long enough. Should be, but I'll text if things run late. As he headed upstairs to shower, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. The panic from yesterday had transformed into something more controlled, more calculated. Rebecca's words echoed in my mind. Document everything. Know your assets. Be 2 steps ahead. While Nathan showered, I quickly photographed the running app history on our tablet. It wasn't much, but Rebecca had emphasized that patterns of deception could be important. After he left for work, I began the real task she'd assigned me. I spent the next 3 hours creating a comprehensive inventory of our assets. Our Queen Anne home, purchased for $1.2 million and now worth nearly $3 million. The Bainbridge Island vacation property, investment accounts, retirement funds. The art collection we'd built together, including pieces by several Pacific Northwest artists that had appreciated significantly. My grandmother's jewelry, which I'd brought into the marriage but had stored in our joint safe deposit box. The picture that emerged was of substantial wealth, most of which was technically joint property, despite Nathan's recent maneuvers. Washington. Being a community property state meant that assets acquired during marriage would typically be divided equally, regardless of whose name was on the paperwork. But, as Rebecca had pointed out, that didn't stop spouses from trying to hide or deplete those assets before filing. By noon, I'd completed my inventory and secured copies of all important financial documents I could access. Some were beyond my reach. Nathan kept certain records in his downtown office, but I had enough to make Rebecca's job easier. I hadn't mentioned my lunch with Melissa earlier. That was actually true. Melissa Hayes had been my best friend since our graduate school days at University of Washington. I needed her perspective, and more importantly, I needed someone else to know what was happening. We met at a small bistro on Capitol Hill, far from Nathan's office or any of our usual spots. The moment she saw my face, her smile dropped. "What's wrong?" she asked as soon as we were seated. I took a deep breath and told her everything. The midnight conversations, the financial discoveries, my meeting with Rebecca. "That complete bastard," she whispered, her face flushing with anger. "I never would have thought Nathan capable of this." "Neither did I admitted. 15 years, Mel. 15 years, and he can walk away like it's nothing." "And who the hell, is Vivian Carlisle?" Melissa asked, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Melissa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What can I do?" "Be my alibi sometimes," I said. "If I need to meet with Rebecca or do something Nathan can't know about." "Of course," she said without hesitation. "Whatever you need. And you can stay with us if things get ugly." The support steadied me. I wasn't alone in this. "I should probably tell you," Melissa said hesitantly. "Ryan mentioned seeing Nathan downtown last week, having drinks at the Fairmont with a woman. He didn't think much of it, assumed it was a client." My stomach tightened. Ryan was Melissa's husband and occasionally crossed paths with Nathan in business circles. "What did she look like?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Melissa grimaced. "He didn't say much. Dark hair, that's all I know. I'm sorry." "It's okay," I said. "Just, if Ryan remembers anything else, I'll let you know immediately." After lunch, I didn't go shopping as I'd told Nathan. Instead, I visited 3 different banks and opened individual accounts, following Rebecca's advice. I transferred modest amounts from my personal checking account into each one. Not enough to alert Nathan, but enough to ensure I had emergency funds if needed. By late afternoon, a strange restlessness had settled in my bones. I found myself driving aimlessly through the city, eventually stopping at Cary Park. I sat on a bench overlooking Elliott Bay, the Seattle skyline spread out before me, and tried to make sense of my new reality. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Meeting running late. Don't wait up for dinner." I stared at the message, noting how differently I read it now. Was he actually in a meeting? or with Vivian. I typed a casual, "no problem," and hit send, the perfect portrait of an unsuspecting wife. On impulse, I opened my Maps app and entered the address of Nathan's office building. The location services showed his phone was nowhere near downtown. Instead, it was in Madison Park, an upscale residential neighborhood on the other side of the city. So much for his meeting. I was tempted to drive there, to catch him in yet another lie, but Rebecca's warning stopped me. Don't let him know you're onto him. Not yet. Information is your advantage right now. When I returned home, the house felt cavernous and cold despite the warm June evening. I wandered from room to room, seeing everything through new eyes. The living room furniture we'd carefully selected together. The kitchen we'd remodeled last year. Had he already been planning his exit then? The framed photo from our anniversary, trip to Santorini just 3 months ago, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling into the camera. Had that smile been genuine, or was he already calculating what assets he could take with him? I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at our dining room table, opening my laptop to check our credit card statements. More breadcrumbs to follow. Dinner for 2 at Canlis last month when Nathan was supposedly at a business dinner. A jewelry purchase from a high-end boutique in downtown Seattle, certainly not for me. Hotel charges in Portland when he'd told me he was at a financial seminar. The evidence mounted, each discovery another small wound. Around midnight, I heard his key in the lock. I'd already retreated to the guest bedroom, claiming a headache in a text message hours earlier. Through the crack in the door, I watched him move through our home with the confidence of someone who believed his secrets were still safe. He checked his reflection in the hallway mirror, straightened his tie, and headed upstairs to what had once been our shared bedroom. That night, staring at the ceiling of the guest room, I made a decision. I wouldn't just protect myself, I would be several steps ahead when Nathan finally decided to make his move. He thought he was the strategic one, the financial expert who could outmaneuver his trusting wife. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. 3 days later, I was sitting at our kitchen island reviewing the documents Rebecca had prepared when Nathan walked in unexpectedly. I quickly slid them into a cooking magazine, my heart racing as I offered a surprised smile. "You're home early," I said, reaching for my tea. The Westbrook meeting finished sooner than expected. He loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. "Thought I'd surprise you." I nodded, watching as he leaned against the counter, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. "We should talk about our anniversary trip," he finally said. "It's only 2 months away. Were you still thinking Kyoto? Our 20th anniversary." He was planning anniversary trips while secretly emptying our accounts. The audacity was breathtaking. "I've been so busy I haven't given it much thought," I lied. In truth, I'd already canceled the tentative bookings I'd made months ago, thankful I hadn't mentioned them to Nathan yet. "Well, we should decide soon. Premium flights are filling up." He took a long sip of his scotch, eyes never leaving mine. "Maybe we could look at options tonight." "Sure," I said, matching his casual tone. "After dinner." He nodded, satisfied, then headed upstairs to change. As soon as he was out of sight, I slipped Rebecca's documents into my tote bag and texted Melissa. "He's planning our anniversary trip. The one he won't be here for." Her response was immediate. "Keeping up appearances. Stay strong." That evening, we sat side by side on the sofa, looking at luxury hotels in Kyoto and discussing excursions to nearby temples. The intimate domesticity of it, his shoulder brushing mine, the familiar scent of his cologne, the way he remembered I wanted to see the bamboo forest in Arashiyama, made my chest ache with a confused mix of love and betrayal. "This one has a private onsen," he said, pointing to a ryokan that cost over $1,000 per night. "Worth the splurge for our 20th, don't you think?" I nodded, wondering if he was already calculating how to cancel these bookings without refund penalties hitting our credit cards. Or perhaps he was planning to take Vivian instead. Definitely, I agreed. It looks perfect. Nathan smiled and squeezed my hand. I want this anniversary to be special. 20 years is a milestone worth celebrating properly. The tenderness in his voice almost made me doubt everything I'd discovered. Almost. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. I'm going to book it tomorrow, he said, closing the laptop, along with those Japan Airlines flights you liked. Later, as we got ready for bed, I watched him move around our bedroom, the practiced routine of 15 years, and wondered how many more nights we would go through these motions. How many more times would I watch him check his phone one last time before setting it on the nightstand? How many more mornings would I wake up beside him, pretending I didn't know our marriage was already over in his mind? The next day changed everything. I had a dentist appointment downtown, just 3 blocks from Nathan's office. On impulse, after my cleaning, I decided to surprise him with coffee, something I occasionally did when I was in the area. It was a risk, given everything I knew, but part of me needed to see his workspace through my new lens of awareness. The receptionist in the lobby greeted me warmly. "Elena, it's been too long. Nathan's in his office. Go on up." I took the elevator to Waitsu, the 14th floor, nodded to his assistant Jen, and walked toward his corner office. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear his voice, that same controlled, quiet tone I'd heard during his midnight phone call. "The transfer should be complete by Friday. I've already moved the offshore accounts beyond her reach." I froze, coffee cups in hand as a woman's voice responded, smooth, confident, professional. "And the Bainbridge property?" "The new deed is ready. Once she signs the refinancing papers, ownership effectively transfers to the holding company. She won't question it?" Nathan's laugh was soft, dismissive. "Elena trusts me with all the financial decisions. She always has. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her." The woman, Vivian, I presumed, made a sound of approval. "And the timing?" "I'll file as soon as the Japanese property closes. 2 weeks, 3 at most." "Japanese property?" My mind raced. We didn't own property in Japan. What was he talking about? "Perfect. And she still has no idea?" "None. We're actually planning our anniversary trip. Kyoto." Nathan's voice held a note of amusement that made my blood run cold. 20 years. Can you believe it?" "Almost over," the woman said softly. "You've been patient, Nathan." The intimacy in her tone told me everything I needed to know about their relationship. This wasn't just a business associate helping Nathan hide assets. This was his future. The future he was planning while systematically dismantling our past. Should have walked away then, preserved what was left of my dignity. But something kept me rooted to the spot. I needed to see her, to make this betrayal concrete in my mind. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door and pushed it open, the practiced smile on my face a masterpiece of deception. "Surprise," I said brightly, holding up the coffee cups. "I was at the dentist and thought you might need a midday boost." The look on Nathan's face was worth whatever pain this moment cost me. Pure shock, followed by a flash of panic before he composed himself. He was standing behind his desk, with a striking dark-haired woman in an impeccable navy suit seated across from him. She turned, her expression perfectly controlled, but her eyes sharp with assessment. "Elena," Nathan recovered quickly, coming around the desk. "This is unexpected." "Clearly," I said, my smile never wavering as I set his coffee on the desk. "I should have texted first." "No, it's fine," he said, the strain in his voice barely detectable. "We were just wrapping up." He gestured to the woman who had risen gracefully from her chair. "This is Vivian Carlisle, our new tax attorney." So, this was Vivian. Elegant, polished, probably early 40s. The diamond on her right hand, not her left, I noted, was at least 3 carats. Her smile was professional, but her eyes were calculating as she extended her hand. Elena, it's a pleasure. Nathan speaks of you often. I shook her hand, meeting her gaze directly. Funny, he's never mentioned you. A flicker of something, amusement, respect, crossed her face. We've only been working together recently. Tax season complexities. In June? I asked innocently. Estate planning, Nathan interjected quickly. For my parents. His parents who had simple investments and had used the same financial advisor in Phoenix for 30 years. I nodded as if this made perfect sense. Well, I won't interrupt your meeting. I just wanted to drop off the coffee. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, Nathan, don't forget we need to sign those anniversary trip bookings tonight. The Kyoto Ryokan needs a deposit. His face tightened almost imperceptibly. I won't forget. As I walked out, I felt their eyes on my back. In the elevator, I finally let my hands shake, the full impact of what I'd witnessed washing over me. This wasn't just about divorce or financial manipulation anymore. This was about Nathan and Vivian planning a complete life together, possibly funded by our marital assets, and they were planning to execute it in less than 3 weeks. I called Rebecca from the street, my voice surprisingly steady as I relayed what I'd overheard. You need to come to my office right now, she said, her tone urgent. This changes our timeline completely. An hour later, I sat across from Rebecca in her downtown office as she rapidly took notes. A Japanese property? She asked. You're certain that's what he said? Positive. And something about transferring ownership of Bainbridge through refinancing documents I'm supposed to sign? Rebecca stopped writing and looked up sharply. Has he asked you to sign anything recently? Not yet. But last week he mentioned wanting to refinance Bainbridge to take advantage of lower interest rates. Don't sign anything, she said emphatically. Not a birthday card, not a credit card receipt if he's watching, nothing. Any signature could be transferred to documents you haven't seen. The reality of what she was suggesting, that Nathan might forge my signature on legal documents, made my stomach turn. What about the offshore accounts he mentioned? I asked. Rebecca's expression darkened. That's the most concerning part. Offshore accounts are specifically designed to hide assets from tax authorities and divorce proceedings. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. Elena, I need to be very clear. We are no longer in the preparation phase. Nathan is actively moving assets beyond your reach right now. We need to take immediate defensive action. What do we do? I asked, leaning forward. First, we file emergency motions to freeze all your joint assets. Second, we document everything you heard today. Every word, every detail. Third, we need forensic accountants to track those offshore transfers. She paused, studying my face. But most importantly, we need to move faster than he expects. Nathan believes he has 2 to 3 more weeks before making his move. His confidence is actually our advantage now. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the desk. Tell me what to do. Rebecca outlined a comprehensive plan, detailed, aggressive, and designed to protect everything Nathan was trying to steal. As she spoke, my shock gave way to clarity. The man I'd loved for 15 years was a stranger to me now. The life we'd built was already gone, whether I acted or not. What about tonight? I asked. He's expecting me to sign those travel documents. Rebecca's smile was cold and precise. Go home. Act normal. Tell him you want to review the documents more carefully. Before signing. Buy us 48 hours. That's all we need. As I left her office, a strange calm settled over me. The turning point had come, not in the way I'd expected, but with absolute clarity. There was no more doubt, no more hope that I had misunderstood or overreacted. Nathan and Vivian had declared war. Now it was my turn to respond. The next 48 hours became a carefully choreographed dance of deception and strategic action. Rebecca's plan was comprehensive, requiring precise timing and complete discretion. One misstep, and Nathan would realize I knew everything. The morning after my office encounter, I woke early and prepared breakfast as usual: fresh coffee, avocado, toast, and the blueberry smoothie Nathan had every weekday morning. When he came downstairs, I greeted him with a smile that felt foreign on my face. "I've been thinking about the Kyoto bookings," I said casually, placing his smoothie in front of him. "Could we review all the details tonight? I want to make sure. The dates work with my foundation board meeting." Nathan hesitated, a flicker of something, impatience, concern, crossing his face before he nodded. "Sure, no problem." "Great. I've got a hair appointment this morning, then lunch with Melissa." Another small lie to cover my actual plans. He glanced up from his phone. "You just had lunch with Melissa earlier this week." My heart skipped. He was paying closer attention than I'd realized. "Different Melissa," I said smoothly. "Melissa Chen from the foundation. We're finalizing the summer fundraiser details." The lie came easily, which should have disturbed me more than it did. But I was learning from the master, wasn't I? "Right," he said, already looking back at his phone. "I might be home late again. The Westbrook situation is still evolving." After he left, I immediately called Rebecca to confirm our plan was in motion. "The papers were filed with the court this morning," she assured me. "Judge Winters has already signed the emergency freeze order. The banks will be served within the hour." "What about the offshore accounts?" I asked. "My financial investigator is already tracing the transfers. If we can document them, it strengthens our case for financial fraud." Next came the most difficult part. I needed to secure copies of all our financial documents, including the ones Nathan kept in his home office. I'd never invaded his private space before. Throughout our marriage, we'd maintained certain boundaries. His office was his sanctuary, just as my art studio was mine. But those boundaries belonged to a marriage that no longer existed. I entered his office with rubber gloves, not to avoid fingerprints, but because touching his things now felt contaminating. The space was meticulously organized, as Nathan had always been with his work. Financial journals lined the bookshelf, family photos decorated the walls, and his desktop was clear except for his computer, a legal pad, and a single framed photo of us from our 10th anniversary in Paris. I started with the filing cabinet, methodically photographing every document inside. Insurance policies, property deeds, investment statements, tax returns. I captured everything. Then I moved to his desk drawers, finding nothing unusual until I reached the bottom right drawer, which was locked. In 15 years, I'd never known Nathan to lock anything in our home. The discovery sent a chill through me. I sat back on my heels, considering my options. I could leave it. Rebecca had emphasized that we already had enough to proceed. But something told me this drawer contained exactly what we needed. After 20 minutes of searching, I found a small key taped under his desk drawer. Not particularly creative, but effective until now. Inside the locked drawer was a red folder labeled Sequence Assets, containing documents that made my blood run. Cold transfer papers for our Bainbridge property to an LLC called Horizon Holdings. Sale documents for our art collection, pieces we'd carefully selected together over the years, dated for next week. A new deed for a property in Hakone, Japan. A luxury villa purchased 3 months ago for nearly $2 million from our joint investment. Account, and most damning of all, a handwritten timeline of Nathan's plan. May 15th. Transfer initial funds offshore. Complete. June 1st. Establish Horizon Holdings, LLC. Complete. June 10th. Secure Hakone property. Complete. June 20th. Transfer Bainbridge title. June 30th. Liquidate remaining transferable assets. July 5th. File divorce papers. July 10th. Departure for Tokyo. I photographed everything with shaking hands, then carefully returned the documents exactly as I'd found them. The timeline explained why he was pushing for me to sign the Kyoto booking. It was all part of maintaining the facade until his July fifth filing date. By early afternoon, I'd completed my covert documentation and met Rebecca at her office to review what I'd found. "This is even worse than we thought," she said, examining the photos of Nathan's timeline. "But it's also exactly what we need. Clear evidence of premeditated financial fraud." "What's our next step?" I asked, still processing the extent of his betrayal. "The emergency freeze has already been implemented," Rebecca explained. "All your joint accounts, investment portfolios, and property transfers are temporarily locked. He won't be able to move anything else without court approval." "When will he find out?" Rebecca's smile was tight. "Likely today when he tries to execute his next transfer. The Bainbridge property move was scheduled for today according to his timeline, right?" I nodded, imagining Nathan's reaction when he discovered his plans had hit an unexpected wall. "We're also filing for exclusive use of the Queen Anne house," she continued. "Based on the evidence of financial fraud, we have grounds to request temporary possession of the primary residence during proceedings." The implications were starting to sink in. "You mean Nathan would have to move out?" "Exactly. And with his timeline exposed, we're also requesting expedited forensic accounting of all accounts, especially tracking those offshore transfers." Rebecca leaned forward, her expression serious. "Elena, there's one more critical step. We need to secure your most valuable personal assets immediately. Anything with significant financial or sentimental value that Nathan might try to leverage." I thought of my grandmother's antique jewelry collection, currently in our safe deposit box, and the original paintings from my time as an artist, stored in our home. Rebecca was right. Nothing was safe until everything was secure. By late afternoon, I had visited our bank and removed everything from our safe deposit box, opened a new one in my name only at a different bank, and arranged for my most valuable personal items to be moved to Melissa's house temporarily. The final step was perhaps the most difficult, transferring funds from our joint household account to my new private account. Rebecca had been specific about the amount, enough to cover necessary expenses for at least 3 months, but not so much that it could be construed as financial misconduct. Washington's community property laws meant that ultimately, all marital assets would be subject to division, but securing my immediate financial independence was crucial. "Nathan controls all the credit cards," I'd explained to Rebecca. "He could cut off my access at any moment." She'd nodded grimly. "Exactly why this step is necessary. It's not about taking more than your share, it's about ensuring basic security." As I completed the transfer, $25,000, approximately 3 months of typical expenses, a notification pinged on my phone. A text from Nathan. "What the hell is going on with our accounts? Call me immediately." So he knew. The bank must have informed him about the freeze. I took a deep breath and texted back. "In a meeting. What's wrong?" His response came seconds later. "Everything's frozen. Some kind of court order. This has to be a mistake." I showed the exchange to Rebecca, who was still with me. She nodded encouragingly. "Perfect. Act confused, concerned, but not immediately available. It buys us more time." I typed, "That sounds serious. My meeting ends at 5. I'll call you right after." No response came, which was concerning in itself. Nathan wasn't one to leave urgent matters unattended. He was likely already contacting his own attorney, possibly Vivian herself. "What happens when I go home tonight?" I asked Rebecca. "He's going to know I'm behind this." "You don't go home," she said firmly. "At least not tonight. We've filed for emergency exclusive use of the residence, but until the judge rules on that motion, it's safest for you to stay elsewhere. Nathan is about to discover that his entire plan has imploded. People can be unpredictable when cornered." The reality of what we were doing, what Nathan had forced me to do, hit me with full force. After 15 years, my marriage was ending. Not with a difficult conversation or even a heated argument, but with legal maneuvers, frozen assets, and strategic planning worthy of a corporate takeover. "This isn't what I wanted," I whispered, more to myself than to Rebecca. She placed her hand over mine. I know. But it's what Nathan made necessary when he chose this path. Remember that. By 6 p.m., I was settled in Melissa's guest room, my essentials, packed in 2 suitcases and my most valuable possessions secured. Nathan had called 7 times, each voicemail more urgent than the last. In the final one, his voice had changed from confused to cold. Elena, I know you're behind this. Whatever you think you're doing, you're making a serious mistake. Call me. Now. The threat was thinly veiled, but unmistakable. Rebecca had been right. Going home wasn't an option. At 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. Melissa checked the security camera and turned to me with wide eyes. It's Nathan. My heart raced. Don't answer, I said immediately. He can't know I'm here. We watched through the camera as Nathan rang again, then pounded on the door. After several minutes, he returned to his car but didn't drive away. He was watching the house. I'm calling. The police, Melissa said, reaching for her phone. No, I said quickly. Not yet. Let me call Rebecca first. Rebecca answered immediately. Where are you? Are you safe? At Melissa's, but Nathan's outside. He's watching the house. She didn't hesitate. Stay inside, away from windows. I'm sending our investigator over. He's an off-duty police officer. He'll document Nathan's behavior and escort him away if necessary. 20 minutes later, a plainclothes officer arrived, spoke briefly with Nathan, and watched as he finally drove away. The officer then came to the door to confirm we were okay. He said he just wanted to talk to his wife, the officer explained. I informed him that continuing to wait outside the residence could be construed as harassment and suggested he communicate through legal channels moving forward. After he left, Melissa poured us both a generous glass of wine. So that happened, she said, trying to lighten the mood. I couldn't even manage a smile. The image of Nathan waiting outside, trying to find me, was disturbing on multiple levels. This was the man I'd built a life with, the man I'd trusted completely for 15 years. You did the right thing, Melissa assured me, seeing my expression. You saw his plan. You know what he was going to do to you. She was right, of course. Nathan's meticulous timeline was proof of his intentions. Still, the finality of it all, the knowledge that there was no going back from this point, left me feeling hollow. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Nathan. Subject. This isn't necessary, Elena. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. The freezing of our accounts, the legal maneuvers, all of this is unnecessary and harmful to both of us. I don't know what you think you know or who's been giving you advice, but this aggressive approach will only make things more difficult. Come. Home. We can talk about whatever's bothering you like the rational adults we've always been. Nathan, no acknowledgement of his plan, no explanation for the timeline I'd found, the offshore accounts, the secret property in Japan. Just gaslighting and manipulation, treating me like an irrational child who had misunderstood something simple. I forwarded the email to Rebecca with a simple note. The gaslighting begins. Her response came quickly. Classic. Document everything. Respond to nothing. Remember, you have the upper hand now. That night, as I tried to sleep in Melissa's guest room, surrounded by hastily packed belongings, I realized something important. Despite the chaos and pain of the day, I felt strangely empowered. For the first time since discovering Nathan's betrayal, I wasn't just reacting, I was directing the course of events. Nathan had spent months planning my financial destruction while smiling in my face and planning anniversary trips. Now, in just 48 hours, I had completely dismantled his careful scheme. He had underestimated me catastrophically, and he was only beginning to realize it. 3 days after implementing Rebecca's plan, I was summoned to the King County Courthouse for an emergency hearing. Nathan had filed a counter-motion, claiming I had maliciously and without cause frozen our assets, causing him significant professional and personal harm. The marble corridors echoed with hurried footsteps as Rebecca and I made our way to courtroom 312. She'd warned me that Nathan would be present with his own attorney, likely not Vivian herself, but someone from her firm. "Remember," Rebecca whispered as we approached the courtroom, "let me do all the talking. Nathan will try to catch your eye, maybe attempt to speak to you directly. Don't engage." I nodded, smoothing down the navy suit I'd chosen carefully for this first public confrontation. I needed to appear composed, rational, professional. The opposite of the hysterical wife Nathan would likely paint me to be. When we entered the courtroom, I saw him immediately. Nathan sat at the respondent's table in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his posture relaxed as he leaned toward a sharp-featured man I didn't recognize, presumably his attorney. At our entrance, Nathan's head turned, his eyes locking with mine for a brief moment before I deliberately looked away. The hearing began promptly at 9:30 a.m., Judge Eleanor Martinez presiding. She was a no-nonsense presence on the bench, reviewing the filings with methodical precision before addressing the court. "I'll hear from the petitioner first," she announced, looking toward Rebecca. Rebecca rose, impeccably prepared as always. "Your Honor, we are here because Mr. Taylor has been systematically transferring marital assets with clear intent to deprive Ms. Westbrook of her rightful share in anticipation of divorce proceedings he was planning to initiate." She methodically presented our evidence: the offshore account transfers, the secret Japanese property purchase, the timeline found in Nathan's desk, and the conversation I'd overheard between Nathan and Vivian. "This isn't a matter of speculation, Your Honor," Rebecca continued. "Mr. Taylor's own written timeline, which we have submitted as Exhibit C, explicitly details his plan to remove assets from the marital estate before filing for divorce on July 5th, a date still 2 weeks away." Nathan's attorney, Mr. Donovan, objected repeatedly, claiming the timeline was private property obtained without consent and that the offshore transfers were legitimate business investments. Judge Martinez overruled most objections, but noted them for the record. When it was Donovan's turn to present, he portrayed me as an unstable, paranoid wife who had jumped to wild conclusions and taken drastic action without justification. "Westbrook has created a crisis where none existed," he argued smoothly. "My client was making standard financial moves to diversify their investment portfolio, moves that, until now, Ms. Westbrook has always trusted him to make as the financial expert in their marriage." I kept my expression neutral, even as rage bubbled beneath the surface. The audacity of this portrayal, painting me as irrational while omitting Nathan's systematic betrayal, was breathtaking. "Furthermore," Donovan continued, "this freeze is actively harming Mr. Taylor's professional reputation. As a financial advisor, his inability to access his own accounts raises questions among his clients and colleagues." Judge Martinez listened, intently, occasionally making notes. When both sides had presented their arguments, she leaned forward. "Mr. Donovan, can you explain why your client purchased property in Japan without his wife's knowledge? Or why his personal notes indicate a plan to transfer their Bainbridge Island home to an LLC called Horizon Holdings?" Donovan stammered slightly. "Your Honor, the Hakone property was intended as a surprise anniversary gift. As for Horizon Holdings, that's simply an estate planning vehicle Mr. Taylor was exploring. A surprise anniversary gift that coincides with a planned divorce filing date?" The judge's skepticism was evident. "And estate planning that involves transferring property away from joint ownership without informing his spouse?" Nathan whispered urgently to Donovan, who adjusted his approach. "Your Honor, if there have been misunderstandings, we are prepared to address them through mediation. But this asset freeze is an extreme measure that's causing immediate harm." Judge Martinez reviewed the documents once more, then looked up decisively. "I find sufficient evidence to maintain the temporary freeze on marital assets pending a full financial review. Ms. Westbrook has presented credible evidence of potential dissipation of marital property." She turned to Rebecca. Regarding your motion for exclusive use of the primary residence, I'm granting that as well. Mr. Taylor will need to remove essential personal items only, under supervision, within 48 hours. Relief washed over me. The judge continued, outlining further terms: accelerated discovery for financial documents, appointment of a forensic accountant to trace the offshore transfers, and a full hearing scheduled for 3 weeks later as we prepared to leave. I finally allowed myself to look directly at Nathan. His expression was thunderous, a muscle working in his jaw as he glared at me across the courtroom. For a brief moment, I glimpsed something unfamiliar in his eyes. Not just anger, but fear. The control he had so carefully maintained was slipping away. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca squeezed my arm. "Round 1 to us," she said with quiet satisfaction. "But this is just the beginning. Nathan won't go down without a fight." She was right. The very next day, I received a text from Melissa. Nathan had been calling mutual friends, telling them I had suffered some kind of breakdown, that I was being manipulated by an aggressive attorney, that he was deeply concerned about my mental state. Classic Darvo, Rebecca explained when I called her. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. He's trying to control the narrative. "What should I do?" I asked, unsettled by how quickly he had pivoted to character assassination. "Nothing," she advised firmly. "Let him flail. The court has seen the evidence. Your real friends will reserve judgment. Responding only validates his approach." 2 days later, I returned to our Queen Anne home, accompanied by the court-appointed supervisor who would oversee Nathan's removal of personal items. Walking through the front door felt surreal. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it, yet nothing was the same. Nathan arrived precisely at the scheduled time, another man in tow to help carry his things. He barely looked at me as the supervisor explained the rules: clothing, personal care items, and specific personal belongings only. No financial documents, no artwork, no furnishings without explicit agreement. As Nathan moved through the house, selecting items with controlled precision, I watched from the kitchen, a strange hollowness in my chest. The supervisor maintained a professional buffer between us, but the tension was palpable. In my bedroom, Nathan paused at the framed photo on his nightstand. Us in Santorini, sunset painting the white buildings gold behind us. After a moment's hesitation, he left it there, a small gesture that pierced through my carefully maintained composure. When he had finished collecting his essentials, he finally addressed me directly. "This isn't over, Elena," he said quietly, his voice level but cold. "You have no idea what you've done." Before I could respond, the supervisor stepped between us. "Mr. Taylor, please remember the court's instructions regarding communication." Nathan nodded curtly and left without another word. As the door closed behind him, I sank onto the living room sofa, the enormity of everything hitting me at once. This house, which had once felt like the heart of our shared life, now echoed with emptiness. But I had survived the first confrontation. The judge had seen through Nathan's facade. The home was secured, the assets protected for now. Small victories that would eventually lead to a final resolution. The following week brought a new challenge. Nathan's attorney filed motions to depose Melissa, claiming she had relevant information about Ms. Westbrook's state of mind and intentions. It was a transparent attempt to intimidate my support system. Rebecca countered immediately with a motion for a protective order, arguing that Nathan was engaging in witness intimidation and unnecessarily increasing litigation costs. She also moved to depose Vivian Carlisle, citing her involvement in the financial planning Nathan had undertaken. "He doesn't want Vivian deposed," Rebecca explained during our strategy meeting. "It's one thing for him to claim these were innocent financial moves. It's another for his paramour to testify under oath about their plans." She was right. 2 days later, Nathan's attorney withdrew the motion to depose Melissa. Our countermove had worked. The forensic accountant's preliminary report arrived next, and it was more damning than even I had anticipated. Beyond the transfers, I'd already discovered Nathan had established a complex network of accounts, moving smaller amounts over time to avoid triggering reporting requirements. The total diverted to offshore accounts exceeded $1.2 million. Most shocking was the discovery of a prenuptial agreement with Vivian, dated 3 weeks earlier, detailing property division between them, property that was still legally part of my marital estate. He was planning to marry her, I said numbly, staring at the document. He had the entire future mapped out. Rebecca nodded grimly. And he was funding that future with your shared assets. This is exactly the smoking gun we needed. Armed with this new evidence, Rebecca requested an immediate hearing. The judge, clearly disturbed by the forensic report, scheduled it for the following Monday. The weekend before the hearing, I received an unexpected text from Nathan. We should talk. Without lawyers. This has gone too far. I forwarded it to Rebecca immediately. Classic, she texted back. He knows the forensic report is devastating. Don't respond. The courtroom on Monday was more crowded than before. Word had spread about the case. A high-profile financial advisor accused of hiding assets in offshore accounts made for compelling legal gossip. I kept my eyes forward, ignoring the whispers as we took our seats. Nathan and his attorney arrived, moments before the judge. He looked different. The confident posture replaced by something more rigid, defensive. The careful facade was cracking. Judge Martinez wasted no time. I've reviewed the forensic accountant's preliminary report, she began, her tone stern. Mr. Donovan, would you care to explain why your client established a prenuptial agreement with a third party regarding assets that are still part of his marital estate with Ms. Westbrook? Donovan cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client acknowledges some judgment errors in his financial planning. We are prepared to offer a settlement that addresses these concerns. The judge's expression hardened. Judgment errors? Mr. Donovan, the evidence suggests deliberate financial fraud. Before we discuss settlements, I want to know if Ms. Carlisle is present today as I requested. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as a side door opened and Vivian Carlisle entered, impeccably dressed but visibly uncomfortable. She took a seat in the gallery, pointedly not looking at Nathan. Ms. Carlisle will be deposed immediately following this hearing, the judge announced. Given the evidence of potential conspiracy to defraud, I'm also referring this matter to the prosecutor's office for review. Nathan went pale. Financial fraud carried potential criminal penalties beyond the civil divorce proceedings, something he had clearly not anticipated. Your Honor, Donovan interjected hastily, we sincerely wish to resolve this matter without further escalation. My client is prepared to make full financial disclosure and agree to an equitable division that acknowledges his indiscretions. Judge Martinez was unmoved. That will be taken into consideration. However, this court cannot ignore evidence of systematic fraud. The asset freeze will continue, and I'm appointing a special master to oversee all marital property pending resolution. Turned to Rebecca. Counsel, your motion for emergency spousal support is granted. Mr. Taylor will provide $12,000 monthly until final resolution, as well as continue payment on all household expenses for the Queen Anne residence. As we left the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of Nathan speaking urgently with Vivian, his gestures tense and frustrated. She shook her head once, definitively, before walking away. Outside, Rebecca's satisfaction was evident. He's losing on all fronts, she said quietly. The legal case, his reputation, and apparently Ms. Carlisle as well. What happens now? I asked, still processing the judge's mention of criminal charges. Now, Rebecca said with certainty, we receive a settlement offer that gives you everything you're entitled to. Nathan can't afford a public trial with criminal charges looming. His entire career is built on financial trust. She was right. The next morning, Donovan contacted Rebecca with an initial settlement proposal. It was insufficient, but it confirmed what we already knew. Nathan was ready to negotiate rather than face further exposure. 3 days of intense back and forth followed. The final settlement, when it came, exceeded even Rebecca's optimistic projections. Full ownership of the Queen Anne home, 65% of all investment accounts, the Bainbridge Island property, full restoration of all offshore transfers, a cash payment of $1.5 million to compensate for legal fees and emotional distress. My grandmother's jewelry collection and all artwork I had acquired or created. And most surprisingly, the Hakone property in Japan. Nathan, in exchange, would receive immunity from criminal prosecution for financial fraud, contingent on full compliance with the settlement terms. Rebecca reviewed the documents carefully, highlighting key provisions. This is an exceptional outcome, Elena. His attempt to leave you with nothing has resulted in you receiving substantially more than an ordinary divorce would have yielded. I stared at the settlement papers, trying to reconcile the magnitude of this victory with the hollow feeling in my chest. All of this because he wanted to start over with someone else. He could have just asked for a divorce. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. Some people can't face their own decisions honestly. It was easier for Nathan to cast you as an obstacle to be eliminated than to acknowledge that he was breaking his commitments. The next day, I signed the settlement agreement in Rebecca's office. Nathan signed separately. We would never need to be in the same room again. As I watched the notary stamp the final page, a strange sense of completion washed over me. My marriage was officially over. But unlike the outcome Nathan had planned, me left financially devastated while he began a new life with Vivian. I was emerging stronger, more secure, and finally free of his manipulation. 1 week later, I received confirmation that all transfers had been completed according to the settlement terms. That evening, I stood on the deck of the Bainbridge Island house, now solely mine, watching the Seattle skyline shimmer across the water as the sun set. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Heard through legal circles that Vivian Carlisle has accepted a position with a firm in Chicago. Apparently, she's no longer interested in a Seattle-based future. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled faintly at the poetic justice. Nathan had lost everything he'd schemed for: the money, the woman, and a significant portion of his professional reputation. Meanwhile, I had found something unexpected. A resilience and clarity I never knew I possessed. Nathan had underestimated me catastrophically, assuming I would remain ignorant until it was too late. His confidence in my ignorance had been his greatest mistake. As darkness fell over the water, I raised my wineglass in a silent toast. Not to victory or vengeance, but to the future. One I would build entirely on my own terms. 6 months after the settlement, I stood in the entryway of my Queen Anne home, now truly mine in every sense, watching as the last of the contractors carried their tools out to their trucks. The renovation was finally complete, transforming the space that had once been filled with painful memories into something that reflected only me. Gone were Nathan's dark leather furnishings and imposing mahogany bookshelves. In their place, light oak floors, cream-colored walls, and large windows that flooded every room with natural light. The home office where I'd discovered his betrayal was now my art studio, sunlight streaming across canvases where I'd rediscovered my passion for painting after so many years. "It's beautiful," Melissa said, handing me a glass of champagne as we stood admiring the finished space. "It feels completely different." "That was the point," I replied, taking a sip. "New beginning, new space." The renovation wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about reclaiming my environment, my life, my story. Every choice, from the kitchen countertops to the bedroom paint color, had been mine alone. No compromises, no deference to someone else's preferences. After 15 years of we, I was learning to embrace I. The months following the settlement had been a journey of rediscovery. Some days were harder than others. Despite everything Nathan had done, there were still moments when grief would ambush me, while sorting through old photos, or when a certain song played on the radio, or simply waking up to the continued shock of emptiness beside me. But those moments grew less frequent as I built a new routine. Weekly dinners with Melissa and her family. Reconnecting with old friends Nathan had subtly distanced me from over the years. Rejoining the board of the Arts Foundation I'd once been passionate about. And most significantly, returning to my own painting, something I'd gradually abandoned during my marriage for reasons I was only now beginning to understand. "Have you decided what you're going to do with the Hakone property?" Melissa asked, as we moved to the living room, settling onto the new sectional sofa that faced the impressive view of Puget Sound. "I'm keeping it," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I visited last month. I paused, searching for the right words. "It's extraordinary. Not just the house, but the location. It sits on this hillside overlooking Lake Ashi with Mount Fuji in the distance. The gardens are immaculate, and it feels completely disconnected from Nathan somehow." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "Even though he bought it for his post-Elena life with Vivian." I laughed. "Maybe that's why. There's something deeply satisfying about using it myself. I'm going back in the spring to paint for a few weeks. Rebecca thinks it could even become a tax write-off if I use it primarily for my artistic work." "Speaking of Rebecca," Melissa said, refilling our glasses, "I saw her at the Martin Gallery opening last week. She mentioned your case has become something of a legend in Seattle legal circles." I smiled at that. Rebecca had become more than just my attorney through the ordeal. She'd become a friend and occasional mentor as I navigated my new independence. She said several of her colleagues have changed how they approach high-asset divorce cases because of what happened with Nathan, Melissa continued. Something about not assuming the financially savvy spouse will always have the upper hand. "That's oddly satisfying," I admitted. The thought that my experience might help other people facing similar situations gave purpose to the pain I'd endured. "Have you heard anything about him recently?" Melissa asked carefully. I shook my head. "Not directly. Rebecca mentioned his firm downsized their Seattle office. Apparently, several major clients left after everything came to light. The financial advisory world runs on trust, and Nathan broke that in the most public way possible. What I didn't mention was the email I'd received from Vivian Carlisle 3 months earlier. It had been unexpected, a brief, formal message explaining that she had never been aware of the full extent of Nathan's plans. "I believed we were planning a future together after an honest divorce," she'd written. "I never agreed to the financial manipulation he undertook, and I was horrified to learn the lengths he went to. I want you to know I've provided additional documentation to your attorney that may help recover certain assets he may have still been concealing." I hadn't responded, but the information she provided had indeed led to the discovery of an additional account in the Cayman Islands that Nathan had failed to disclose. The amount wasn't substantial compared to what had already been settled, but Rebecca had leveraged it to secure an additional penalty payment for non-disclosure. The truth was, I no longer spent much time thinking about Nathan or Vivian. The space they had once occupied in my life had been filled with new experiences, new friends, and rediscovered passions. The betrayal that had once consumed my every waking thought had receded into something more distant, a painful chapter that had ultimately led to unexpected growth. "You know what's funny?" I said to Melissa, looking around at my transformed home. "If Nathan had simply asked for a divorce, been honest about wanting to leave, I would have been devastated, but we could have divided things fairly. He would have kept his reputation, half the assets, and probably even my grudging goodwill eventually." Melissa shook her head. "Men like Nathan don't see the world that way. It wasn't just about leaving you. It was about winning, about proving. He was smarter than everyone else, especially you. And instead, he lost everything, I mused. The money, Vivian, his professional standing, all because he couldn't imagine I would figure out what he was doing and take action. Underestimating you was his biggest mistake, Melissa said, raising her glass in a toast. To men who think they're the smartest person in the room, may they continue to be wrong. I laughed and clinked my glass against hers. I'll drink to that. Later that evening, after Melissa had gone home, I sat alone on my deck watching the city lights shimmer across the water. The air was crisp with the first hints of autumn, and the sky above was surprisingly clear for Seattle, stars visible between wisps of cloud. My phone chimed with a text from Rebecca. Final paperwork filed today. The last offshore account has been transferred to your name. It's officially completely over. I typed back a simple, "Thank you for everything," knowing those words could never fully express my gratitude. Rebecca had been more than an attorney. She'd been a guide through the darkest period of my life, showing me a path forward when I could barely see the next step. As I set my phone down, I realized something important. The relief I felt wasn't just about the money or the properties secured. It was about reclaiming my story. Nathan had tried to write my ending, a financially devastated ex-wife, shell-shocked and struggling while he moved on to a carefully curated new life. Instead, I had seized the pen and written something entirely different. The next morning, I woke early and made my way to my studio as golden light filtered through the east-facing windows. I stood before a blank canvas, the first in a new series I'd been contemplating for weeks. Using broad strokes, I began laying down the base colors, working intuitively rather than from a detailed plan. As the image began to take shape, a solitary figure standing at the edge of a lake, mountains rising in the distance, I thought about the journey of the past year, the midnight discovery of betrayal, the strategic moves to protect what was mine, the courtroom confrontations, and finally, the resolution that had left me not just intact, but stronger. I had learned lessons I never sought to learn. How quickly trust can shatter. How people can wear masks for years. How systems designed to protect can sometimes be weaponized against the vulnerable. But I'd also discovered my own resilience, resourcefulness, and capacity for rebuilding. 3 weeks later, I was adding the final touches to the painting when my phone rang. It was Daniel, the director of the Seattle Arts Foundation. Elena, the board reviewed your proposal for the Survivors Workshop series. It's unanimously approved. Full funding starting in January. My breath caught. The proposal, a series of art therapy workshops for women rebuilding their lives after divorce or domestic trauma, had been deeply personal, inspired by my own experience and the healing I'd found through returning to my art. That's wonderful news, I managed, emotion tightening my throat. Thank you. No, thank you, Daniel replied warmly. This program fills a real need, and your personal perspective makes you uniquely qualified to lead it. After we hung up, I stood before the finished painting, seeing it with new eyes. What had begun as an expression of my individual journey was evolving into something larger, a way to help others navigate their own paths through betrayal and rebuilding. 3. Following weekend, I hosted a small gathering at my home, the first since the renovation. Melissa and her husband, Rebecca and her partner, several friends from the Arts Foundation, and 2 new friends I'd made through a hiking group I'd joined in the spring. As conversation and laughter filled the rooms that had once been so silent and tense, I slipped away briefly to my studio, taking a moment to center myself amid the joy of the evening. On my work table lay the official invitation to exhibit my new series at a respected gallery in Portland, my first show in over a decade. Beside it was the deed to the Hakone property, now registered solely in my name, where I plan to establish a small artist retreat program. And nearby, a notebook filled with curriculum ideas for the Survivors Workshop series. these weren't just professional accomplishments. They were markers of a life reclaimed and redirected. A life that would have remained unlived if Nathan had succeeded in his plans. Later, as my guests were leaving, Rebecca lingered behind. "You've created something beautiful here," she said, gesturing around the space. "Not just the house, the life. It suits you." "It does," I agreed, "though I never would have chosen this path." She nodded, understanding. The hardest journeys often lead to the most unexpected destinations. After everyone had gone, I stood again on my deck, watching the moon cast a silver path across the dark waters of the Sound. If I could somehow send a message back through time to myself on that rainy night when I first overheard Nathan's call, that frightened, confused woman trying to make sense of her unraveling world, what would I say? Perhaps simply this: trust yourself. The pain ahead is real, but so is your strength. The ending he's planning for you is not the ending you'll write for yourself. Nathan had thought he could orchestrate my downfall with the same precision he applied to his financial strategies. He had counted on my ignorance, my trust, my hesitation. What he failed to account for was my capacity to fight for myself when everything was at stake. One decision, the choice to act rather than crumble, had altered the entire trajectory of my life. Not just financially, but in reclaiming my voice, my passions, my agency in the world. I had lost a marriage, yes. But I had found myself, and in the final accounting, that was the true victory. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.